The first time Mark called our daughter manipulative. She was lying on the bathroom floor, shaking, crying, her little fingers clinging to my shirt as she vomited into a towel. "Julia," he said, voice flat from the bedroom doorway. "You're seriously falling for that again?" I looked up from where I was kneeling beside Ella. Her fever had hit 102.3, her face pale and soaked with sweat. I was about to ask him to bring another towel, maybe help me get her cleaned up, but the look on his face froze the words in my throat. "She's faking," he added, arms crossed. "She figured out that pretending to be sick gets her out of school and earns your undivided attention. Don't reward her for it." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because Ella was sick, though she was violently so, but because something in me snapped. Mark had always been disconnected. Emotionally stunted, maybe. But this wasn't just ignorance. It was cruelty wrapped in self-righteousness. He watched his 4-year-old daughter heave her tiny stomach out onto the floor, and the only thing he saw was a performance. That wasn't a father. That was a man too broken to recognize pain in others, because he'd buried his own too deep to feel it anymore. Mark's beliefs about illness weren't new. When my sister was diagnosed with anxiety during the early months of COVID, he scoffed and said she needed to go run 3 miles and sweat it out. When I caught the flu 2 winters ago and spent 2 days in bed, he brought me tea once, then said I was over-dramatizing a minor bug. He doesn't believe in sick days. Doesn't believe in medication unless you're literally dying. Doesn't believe, apparently, in basic human compassion. He claims it's how he was raised. In his family, being sick was weakness. His father used to say things like, "Real men don't puke," and "coughing is for cowards." It's like someone handed him a manual titled Toxic Masculinity 101, and he studied it religiously. I thought things would change when Ella was born. Surely, I believed no one could hold a newborn in their arms and still believe vulnerability was a sin. But I was wrong. Mark was distant even then. When she cried at night, he would roll over and say, "She's manipulating you. Let her cry it out." When I went back to work part-time, he'd sometimes forget to feed her lunch, claimed it would strengthen her survival instincts. We fought about it more than once. At one point, I threatened legal action if he didn't start meeting her basic needs. He shaped up a little, fed her, bathed her, helped with bedtime, but he never truly understood what it meant to be emotionally present. And when it came to illness, that wall never cracked. Not once. Vaccines were a battlefield. Fevers were psychosomatic. Even allergies. Made-up excuses by pharmaceutical companies to sell Claritin. That's who he was. And I'd made peace with managing around it. Until that night. Until Ella's tiny body curled against mine on the bathroom tiles, her sobs muffled against my chest, while Mark stood just a few feet away and called her a liar. I didn't say anything then. I tucked her in after she fell asleep. I cleaned the bathroom. I canceled my shift at the hospital the next day to stay home with her while she continued vomiting. Mark went to work like nothing had happened. That night, he looked at me as I sat on the edge of the bed and said, "I still think she faked it." I stared at him, and all I could think was, if you can't believe a child when they're shaking in your arms, what else will you dismiss? Her heartbreak someday? Her fear? Her dreams? Something shifted in me that night. A line was drawn. I wasn't going to argue anymore. I wasn't going to beg for empathy. I was going to wait. Because karma, in my experience, never forgets an address. It wasn't the first time Mark had reduced someone's pain to a performance, but it was the first time that someone was his own daughter. I remember years ago, sitting across from him at the kitchen table while I tried to explain my sister Caroline's panic attacks. She'd been struggling since high school, trouble breathing, shaking hands, a feeling like the walls were closing in. "She needs support," I said gently, not judgment. Mark had laughed. "She needs a treadmill and a reality check. Everyone gets stressed. Doesn't mean you have a disorder." He said it so casually, as if labeling pain made it less real. And it wasn't just my sister. When I was pregnant with Ella and suffered from relentless morning sickness, Mark suggested I stop reading those dramatic mommy blogs and focus on positive energy. When my coworker had a miscarriage, he told me she was probably just exaggerating the grief. It's not like she held the baby, he'd shrugged. Each time, I'd swallowed my outrage. I told myself he just didn't understand. That maybe, with time and exposure and love, he'd learn to be softer. But Mark didn't learn. Not really. He adapted just enough to appear functional. He changed diapers. He showed up to preschool orientation. He remembered Ella's favorite bedtime story. But he never changed what was underneath. The belief that vulnerability was a trick. That pain was weakness. That love required proof. And when Ella got sick, really sick for the first time in her life, that belief came roaring back like it had been waiting for an opportunity to assert itself. I watched him stare at her from across the room with a mixture of annoyance and detachment, as if her illness was a personal inconvenience. What he didn't see, what he refused to see, was the way she flinched when he raised his voice. The way she looked at me, confused, when he wouldn't hold her hair back. The way she whispered, "Why won't Daddy believe me?" That whisper lodged in my spine like a thorn. I had spent 4 years protecting Ella from the darker parts of her father's personality. I ran interference. I softened his edges. I stepped in when he snapped, made excuses when he withdrew, and filled in the emotional gaps he left behind. I told myself I was shielding her. But that night, when she looked at me with wide eyes full of betrayal, I realized something else. Maybe I wasn't protecting her. Maybe I was enabling him. There's a moment in every marriage where you stop hoping for change and start planning for impact. Mine came in the quiet space between Ella's sobs and Mark's indifference. In that space, I saw the shape of my future. One where my daughter learned to doubt her own experiences because the man who was supposed to believe her most treated her pain like an inconvenience. And I couldn't let that happen. The next day, I called off work. I stayed home and fed Ella sips of water, held cool cloths to her forehead, cleaned up after every bout of vomiting. I monitored her fever and kept her in clean pajamas. I rubbed her back and sang softly when she couldn't sleep. Mark didn't help. In fact, he rolled his eyes when I mentioned how many times she'd thrown up. She probably snuck something sweet when you weren't looking. Kids are sneaky like that. His voice was coated in condescension, like he thought I'd been played by a 4-year-old criminal mastermind. That night, after Ella finally fell asleep, I sat in the darkened kitchen, staring at nothing. I felt hollowed out, by exhaustion, by anger, by something deeper I didn't yet have a name for. Mark walked in, poured himself a glass of wine, and said, "She'll be fine by tomorrow. You'll see. And next time, maybe don't give in to the theatrics so quickly." I didn't look at him, didn't speak, didn't trust myself to open my mouth without screaming. But inside, something shifted again, not a crack this time, but a fracture. He wasn't just wrong. He was dangerous, not the kind that bruises skin, but the kind that leaves scars you can't explain. 3 weeks later, it was his turn. It started with him waking up nauseous, pale, and irritable. I was in the kitchen making Ella's breakfast when he shuffled in, hunched over and holding his stomach. "I think I ate something bad last night," he mumbled, sinking into a chair. I didn't flinch. "Maybe. Or maybe you're just looking for attention." He blinked at me, confused. I set down Ella's bowl of cereal, kissed her hair, and walked past him with barely a glance. I had work to do, a child to care for. His stomach ache didn't register on my radar, not after what he'd done. The vomiting came that afternoon. Loud, violent. I heard it from upstairs while Ella and I built a tower out of blocks in the living room. The sound made her pause. "Mommy," she whispered, "is Daddy okay?" I shrugged, probably just being dramatic. You know how he gets. She didn't laugh. She just watched me carefully, like she was trying to understand a joke that didn't feel very funny. By evening, Mark was curled on the bathroom floor, clutching his sides, begging for water. His face was ghostly, hair matted to his forehead. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and tilted my head slightly. I think I remember you once telling my sister to just go outside and sweat it out. Maybe give that a try." He glared at me, but he didn't respond. His stomach answered for him, another dry heave echoing off the tile. "Julia, please," he croaked. "I can't even stand. I need water. I need help." I leaned against the doorframe, heart pounding, not from fear, not from pity, but from clarity. "You're probably fine," I said. "Ella threw up for 2 days, remember? And you said she was just acting. So maybe that's what you're doing now." His face contorted, not just from nausea, but from the slow, dawning realization that I was serious, that I meant every word. "I'm not pretending," he gasped. "No," I said, voice low, "because I remember a man standing in this exact hallway 3 weeks ago, looking at his feverish daughter and accusing her of faking. So forgive me if I don't rush to your aid." I turned to leave, but he grabbed the frame of the door with trembling fingers. "Julia, don't do this. I'm actually sick." "So was she," I said. "She was 4, and she begged you to help her." I walked away then, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. Because I knew that if I gave in now, if I offered him kindness without accountability, it would all go back to how it was before. And I couldn't do that to Ella. Not again. Downstairs, she was coloring a picture of a house with 3 stick figures in front of it. One with long hair, one small with pigtails, and one taller, standing apart from the others. "Is Daddy still sick?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, handing her a fresh sheet of paper. "He's not feeling well today." She frowned and stirred her spoon through her cereal, her little brow furrowed. "When I was sick, Daddy said I was pretending. Was I pretending, Mommy?" My heart cracked clean down the center. I sat beside her and brushed her hair back gently. "No, baby, you were really sick. Sometimes Daddy doesn't understand things the way he should." She nodded slowly. Then, from upstairs, another wave of retching filled the air. Ella's eyes widened. "That's what I sounded like," she whispered. I pulled her into my lap, held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I know, sweetheart. And I stayed with you, because that's what we do when someone we love is hurting." She looked up at me, serious now. "But you're not taking care of Daddy." The innocence of the observation hit me like a fist. I kissed her forehead and gently placed her back in her chair. "Finish your breakfast, okay? I need to check on something." I didn't go upstairs right away. I poured her some more milk. I wiped the counter. I breathed, because I knew that what I was doing wasn't cruel. It was necessary. By mid-morning, Mark had made his way downstairs, pale and shaking. He leaned against the kitchen counter, barely able to keep his eyes open. I was making toast for Ella, something light, something familiar. He opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, I cut in. "You don't look well," I said, "but I'm sure it's all in your head." He blinked at me, confused, like he didn't recognize the words. Then he realized they were his, the same ones he'd spoken to Ella 3 weeks ago. He said nothing. Ella, sitting at the kitchen table with her crayons and her cereal, looked up at him. "Daddy," she said softly, "when I was sick, you said I was making it up. Are you making it up too?" Mark froze. His hand gripped the counter a little tighter, and for a moment he looked so much smaller than usual, like the weight of her words had actually hit somewhere deeper than his gut. "I'm not making it up, sweetie," he said hoarsely. "I really am sick." "Oh," Ella said simply. Then she added, "Maybe you should convince yourself you're not sick. That's what you told Mommy to tell Aunt Caroline when she had the sad sickness." The color drained from his face completely. I bit the inside of my cheek, not to keep from laughing, but to keep from crying. The truth of children is that they never say things to hurt, they just tell you what they remember. And what she remembered, word for word, was the lack of belief. After Mark stumbled back upstairs, Ella turned to me and asked, "Mommy, does it work? Convincing yourself you're not sick." I shook my head slowly. "No, baby, it doesn't." We spent the rest of the morning in our little bubble. I helped her write her name on construction paper, read 2 picture books about dinosaurs, and even made Play-Doh cookies that she warned me, very seriously, were definitely not for eating. Every so often, we heard Mark move overhead, a groan, the flush of the toilet, a thud against the wall. Ella paused once during coloring, looked toward the ceiling, and asked, "Mommy, should we make Daddy soup? You made me soup when I was sick." The innocence in her voice cracked something in me. Here was this tiny person, offering empathy that her father couldn't find for her. She wasn't keeping score. She was just remembering kindness and wanting to share it. I knelt beside her, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and said, "That's very thoughtful of you, sweetheart. But remember how Daddy said being sick is just in your head? If it's not real, he probably doesn't need soup, does he?" She considered this with a wrinkled brow, that serious little frown only small children make when trying to puzzle out the world. But what if it is real? What if his tummy really hurts like mine did? "Then maybe," I said quietly, "he'll understand how you felt when he didn't believe you." She nodded slowly, but the weight of that lesson, it was heavy for 4-year-old shoulders. Too heavy. Was I doing the right thing? I didn't want to raise her to believe in revenge. But I also couldn't raise her to believe that her pain should be dismissed. That love meant tolerating indifference. At around 1 o'clock, Mark reappeared, gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing holding him upright. His eyes were hollow, his cheeks sunken. Ella looked up from her coloring and said, with the same calm tone she always used when describing a butterfly or a picture book, "Daddy, you look really sick." Mark barely nodded. He shuffled to the fridge, poured water with shaking hands, and spilled half of it on the counter. Ella set down her crayon and tilted her head. "Daddy, remember when I was sick and you said I was pretending? Were you pretending?" He stared at her, then at me, then back at her. For the first time since I'd known him, he had no answer. That afternoon, Mark tried to eat a few spoonfuls of plain rice. He barely got it past his lips before running to the bathroom again. Ella watched him go, then looked up at me, her brow furrowed in concern. "Mommy, why won't you help Daddy?" I sat beside her, gently smoothing her hair. "Do you remember when you were sick, sweetheart? When you asked Daddy for help and he said you were pretending?" She nodded slowly. It made me feel really sad and scared. My tummy hurt so bad, and he didn't believe me. "Well," I said, "now Daddy is learning what it feels like when someone doesn't believe you." She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "But 2 wrongs don't make a right. That's what Mrs. Thompson says." I blinked. The words stung, not because they were wrong, but because they were so achingly true. And they were coming from the mouth of a 4-year-old who'd already seen more emotional neglect than any child ever should. Before I could answer, Mark stumbled out of the bathroom again. He made it 3 steps before his legs gave out, collapsing against the wall. Ella gasped and stood up, but I gently put a hand on her shoulder. "Finish your lunch, baby. Daddy's just being dramatic." Mark looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. "Julia, please. I think I'm dehydrated. I need 4 fluids. I need to go to urgent care." I crossed my arms. "You once told my sister that doctors were a scam, remember? That they just push pills to make money. That the human body can heal itself if we just toughen up." He shut his eyes, defeated. Ella was no longer eating. She was watching him with worry, but also confusion. I saw it in her little face, that warring impulse between compassion and memory. "Mommy," she whispered, "Daddy looks really bad." I nodded slowly. "Yes, he does. Maybe we should help him now." "Maybe," I said, "but sometimes people need to really feel something before they understand what it means to hurt someone else." We left him there on the floor and went upstairs. I helped Ella change into her favorite purple dress with butterflies on the sleeves, braided her hair into 2 neat plaits. She kept glancing toward the hallway, her voice soft. "Is Daddy going to be okay?" "Daddy will be fine," I said. "He just needs to learn an important lesson." "What kind of lesson?" That when someone tells you they're hurting, you should believe them. When we came back down, Mark had managed to drag himself to the couch. He was curled up in the fetal position, still clutching his stomach. His skin was gray, his lips dry. "Julia," he rasped, "I'm sorry." "Okay. Is that what you want to hear?" "I'm sorry." I looked at him carefully. "Sorry for what, exactly?" He swallowed. "For not believing Ella. For not helping her." I shook my head. "No, Mark. You're not sorry. You're scared. You want help now because you need it. That's not the same as understanding what you did." Ella tugged on my hand. "Mommy, if Daddy says sorry, shouldn't we forgive him?" I knelt beside her. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people need to really understand what they did wrong before we can forgive them. Daddy's not there yet." We spent the rest of the afternoon in the backyard. Ella blew bubbles and sang little songs. I watched her spin in circles, laughing, free of the heaviness she carried a few weeks ago. Mark's face appeared at the window once. Pale, hollow. He watched her silently, then vanished again. Around dinner time, he reappeared in the kitchen, hunched and trembling. There was a paper in his hand and his phone beside it. "What's this?" I asked. "My mother's number," he said, voice broken. I was going to ask her to come help. I almost laughed. "The same woman who sent you to school with a fever and called you weak for crying when you broke your arm? You think she's going to help you with a stomach bug?" His shoulders shook. Ella climbed onto the chair beside him. "Daddy, you look like I did when I was sick." He nodded, his eyes full of tears. "I'm so sorry, baby. I should have believed you." "Why didn't you?" she asked, so simply it hurt. He looked at me, then back at her. "Because when I was little, my daddy told me that being sick was bad. That strong people don't get sick." "But everybody gets sick sometimes," Ella said. "Even superheroes. I saw it on TV." He gave a short, broken laugh. "You're right." She reached out, patted his shoulder. "When I was sick and you didn't help, it made me think you didn't love me." His face crumpled. I do love you," he said, his voice shaking. "So much. I didn't know how to show it." "Mommy says grown-ups learn wrong things sometimes," she said, "but then they can learn better things." Mark looked at me again. "Don't look at me for rescue," I thought. "This is your mess to clean." That night, after Ella had taken her bath and carefully arranged her stuffed animals in their proper places, Mr. Bunny on the right, Bear on the left, Princess Unicorn at the bottom of the bed, she turned to me and asked, "Can Daddy help me with bedtime tonight?" I hesitated. Mark was still recovering, still pale and slow, still walking like every step required negotiation with gravity, but I nodded. "If he wants to," I said. Mark had been sitting on the edge of the couch, head bowed. He looked up, surprised. I do," he said quietly, "if she wants me to." And so he did. He followed her upstairs, carefully holding the railing, while she bounced ahead, narrating every step. First we brushed teeth, then pajamas, then story. "You can pick the book tonight, Daddy." He watched her brush with serious focus, nodded solemnly when she showed how she could reach her back molars now. He fumbled with her pajama buttons, his hand still trembling, but she didn't complain. When it came time for the story, he chose one about a little elephant afraid of water. She nestled under the covers, watching him as he read. When he reached the part where the elephant learns he doesn't have to be afraid anymore, Mark's voice caught. Ella didn't comment. She simply reached out, patted his hand, and said, "It's okay to be scared sometimes. Mommy says even brave people get scared." He closed the book, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You're the bravest person I know." After she fell asleep, he sat there for a while, watching her breathe, her small chest rising and falling, her arms tangled around her unicorn. I stood at the door unseen. When he finally emerged into the hallway, he swayed slightly, gripping the wall. "Let me help you," I said, surprising myself. He looked at me with something like gratitude, but also grief. I offered my arm, and he leaned on me as we walked back downstairs. Once in the guest room, I fetched him another glass of water, a cold washcloth, and the anti-nausea tablets from my nurse's kit. As I set them down on the nightstand, he reached for my hand. "I want to see someone," he said. "A therapist. Someone who can help me understand why I'm like this. Why I couldn't see what I was doing to her." I pulled my hand back, gently. "That's a start. Would you come with me? For family therapy?" "Maybe," I said. "Eventually. But you need to do the work on your own first. You need to understand the depth of what you've done, not just to her, but to the way she sees herself." He nodded slowly, exhausted. "I know. I'm terrified that I've already broken something in her." "She's resilient," I said, "but not the way you think. She's resilient because she's been loved, because she has at least one parent who believes her when she says she's hurting." He closed his eyes. "She should have had two." I didn't respond. I returned to Ella's room to check on her one last time. She was sleeping peacefully, Mr. Bunny tucked under one arm, her braid draped across the pillow. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You did so good, baby. You taught him more than I ever could." Downstairs, the house was quiet. I heard Mark shifting in the guest room. Not the sounds of pain anymore, but of movement. Of someone trying to reclaim something he thought he'd lost. The next morning, he emerged on his own. Still weak, still shaky, but walking. Ella noticed first. "Daddy's walking," she squealed, beaming. He smiled faintly, lowering himself carefully into the chair across from her. She slid her plate of toast toward him. "You can have this one, Daddy. It helped my tummy." He looked at the toast like it was a sacred offering. He took a bite and managed to keep it down. Ella clapped softly. "Yay, that means your tummy's learning to be better." He chuckled, a tired, broken sound. "It's learning." Later that day, a knock came at the door. Tom from Mark's office stood on the porch, holding a box. Inside was his laptop, some files, and a letter on company letterhead. They'd let him go. Ella peered into the box. "Is Daddy in trouble?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. Mark didn't speak for a while, just sat on the bottom stair, reading the letter again and again. "I ruined everything," he whispered. "No," I said. "You're just finally seeing it." That afternoon, Ella painted while he watched. She showed him how to mix colors, told him pink was made from red and white and green was made from blue and yellow. He dipped the brush uncertainly, then painted a blob of green in the corner of the page. "What is it?" she asked. "I don't know yet." "That's okay," she said. "Sometimes we don't know what we're making until we're done." Later, when I tucked her in, she asked, "Mommy, is Daddy going to be okay?" I paused. "What do you think?" She yawned. "I think he's trying, and trying is the most important part." I kissed her forehead. "That's what wise people say." She rolled over, clutching Mr. Bunny. "Mommy, tomorrow can we all have breakfast together? Like a real family?" I didn't answer right away, but something in my chest loosened. "We'll see," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I almost meant it. It was a late autumn afternoon in Portland, Oregon, the kind where the sky dimmed too early and the breeze carried just enough chill to make your hands instinctively seek warmth. I remember standing by the kitchen window, stirring the bechamel for lasagna, watching leaves spiral onto the sidewalk below. My heart was hammering. My hand kept drifting to the little curve of my stomach. Not visible yet, but unmistakably there. I was 12 weeks pregnant, and tonight I was going to tell Ethan. We had been married for 4 years, together for 7. We were never the type to map our future with Pinterest boards or countdown apps. Still, there had been lazy Sunday talks of someday we'd take that trip to Barcelona, someday we'd get a dog, someday we'd have a child. But we never circled a date on the calendar, never really planned. Life was too busy, his work was always on fire, and I was constantly juggling client deadlines at the architecture firm. We floated through time like we had all the years in the world. I didn't plan to get pregnant. It was one of those rare but all too real side effects. The antibiotics I took during that stomach bug messed with my birth control. I didn't even realize what was happening until I was 3 days late, then 5, then nauseous enough to skip my morning coffee. For tests later, there was no denying it. At first, I panicked. I wasn't ready. Ethan wasn't ready. But when I pictured a child, our child, everything softened. I started thinking about lullabies, warm socks, the way Ethan smiled when he looked at baby photos of his nephew. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected news could be something good. I didn't want to stage a social, media-worthy moment. That wasn't us. So instead, I decided on comfort. His favorite lasagna, garlic bread, and a bottle of Blanton's bourbon he'd been saving for a good night. For myself, I had chilled sparkling cider and wore the navy dress he always said brought out my eyes. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a quiet one. But I had hope. He came home late, almost 7:30. Jacket slung over one arm, phone in his hand, Bluetooth still in his ear. He barely looked up when he walked in. "Smells good," he muttered, pouring himself a double bourbon before sitting at the table. I tried to brush off the unease creeping into my chest. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe work had been hell again. But his phone kept lighting up beside him, and he kept checking it. Dinner was awkward. I asked about his pitch meeting, about how his new intern was adjusting. He gave me nothing but one-word answers. Fine. Not bad. We'll see. He didn't ask me about my day. He didn't notice I hadn't poured wine. He didn't look me in the eye. Still, I pushed forward. After clearing the plates, I wiped my hands on a towel, took a breath so deep it hurt, and walked over to him. "I have some news," I said softly, sitting across from him. "It's going to change things." His eyes flicked up from his glass. "What kind of news?" "I'm pregnant." Silence. Then, something cracked across his face. Not joy, not surprise, not even confusion. No, what I saw was panic. Cold, raw panic. Like I'd just dropped a grenade onto his perfectly arranged life. "Is this a joke?" he asked, voice low but sharp. "I've taken 4 tests," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I saw my doctor this morning. It's real." He stared at me, then stood up, pushed the chair back with a screech that made me flinch. And then he said it. "You ruined everything." I blinked. "What?" "I didn't want this," he snapped, pacing now. "You know I didn't want this. I thought we were being careful." I tried to explain about the antibiotics, about how rare this kind of interference was, how I'd never meant to trick him or trap him. "That's not the point," he shouted. "I never wanted kid. I just didn't say it out loud because I knew you'd leave." That hit harder than anything else. I felt something shatter inside. "So what? All those times you said someday you were lying." He didn't answer. He just grabbed his phone, started typing furiously. I stood frozen, arms crossed over my stomach, like I could shield the baby from his words. "Is there someone else?" I whispered. His silence was louder than any confession. And then, "Lauren." Of course, Lauren Kimu, the junior creative at his agency, the one he kept calling a fresh spark. I always thought he just admired her work. My knees buckled slightly, but I didn't sit down. I needed to stay standing, just to remind myself I was still here. Within 10 minutes, Ethan was packing. Not just a gym bag, an actual suitcase. Socks, dress shirts, his toothbrush. I followed him down the hall, numb. "You're leaving?" I asked. "Now." He zipped the case. "I'm going to Lauren's. Just for now. I need space. You're abandoning me tonight after this?" He didn't even flinch. "I'm not ready to be a father. I never will be." And then just like that, he left. The door closed. The bourbon glass still sat half full on the table. The lasagna went cold. And I stood alone in our apartment, pregnant, heart splintered, staring at the life I thought I had, collapsing in real time. I didn't cry until I heard the elevator ding and realized he was really gone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, curled in the blanket we used to share during movie marathons, staring at the shadow of our ceiling fan spinning above me. The silence was deafening. Ethan had always left his dress shoes near the door. They were gone. His cologne still lingered faintly in the hallway, like a cruel reminder that he'd been there and chosen to leave. Around 2 a.m., I called Nina. I didn't even mean to. I must have hit her name by muscle memory. When she picked up, I couldn't speak. She just listened to me sob for almost a minute straight before saying, "I'm on my way." By 2:30, she was knocking on my door in sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, clutching a bag of snacks, a hot water bottle, and a look that could have burned Ethan alive if he dared show his face. She didn't ask questions right away, just pulled me into a hug so tight it broke what little composure I had left. We sat on the couch, me wrapped in a blanket, Nina quietly slicing apples in the kitchen like it was the most normal thing in the world. When I finally told her everything, that I was pregnant, that Ethan had been cheating, that he left that same night, she didn't gasp or curse. She just stared at me and said, "Then we figure this out. You and me. You're not alone." That line, it was the first thing that made me cry for a reason other than pain. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, puffy-eyed and aching all over. Nina had taken the armchair, a half-empty cup of chamomile tea beside her. For a second, I let myself believe it had all been a bad dream. Then the wave of nausea hit, swift and cruel, anchoring me to reality. I sat in the bathroom, face pale, heart pounding. I looked down at my stomach, not yet showing but impossibly real. I whispered, "It's just us now, little one." And something about saying it out loud shifted the weight. I wasn't ready. I didn't know how. But this child was mine, and I wasn't going anywhere. I made an appointment with my OB/GYN that afternoon. When I told the receptionist I was newly pregnant and had just been left by my husband, she paused for a beat before gently saying, "We'll take good care of you, honey." The clinic smelled like lavender and sanitizer. I sat in the waiting room surrounded by glowing women, many with partners rubbing their backs or scrolling on phones beside them. I folded my hands over my stomach and tried not to feel like the odd one out. Then they called my name. The ultrasound room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. The technician, a woman named Carla with warm eyes and pink scrubs, dimmed the lights and pressed the wand to my stomach. A minute passed, then came the sound. That unmistakable, fluttery rush. "That's the heartbeat," she whispered. "Strong and steady." I cried. Not the dramatic, shaking kind, but the quiet, overwhelming kind that comes from your chest splitting open and your soul realizing something new has begun. That sound wasn't just proof of life. It was the beginning of mine, too. They printed the image, just a little speck shaped like a comma, but to me it looked like everything. I slipped it into my bag like a secret and walked out into the cold afternoon wind with my coat zipped high and my future still spinning in pieces, but not completely shattered. Back at home, I texted Ethan. "Me. I had my first appointment today. The baby's healthy." The message showed delivered. No reply. I sent another. "Me. I don't expect you to know what to say right now, but please don't shut me out. I didn't choose this alone." Still nothing. 3 hours later, he finally responded. "Ethan, I need time. I'll send money for the bills." Not a question about the appointment, not a mention of the baby. Just logistics, like this was a transaction he couldn't wait to end. I didn't reply. What was there to say? That night, Meredith, his mother, called me. I almost didn't pick up. I wish I hadn't. "Grace," she started, her voice clipped but polite. "Ethan told us what happened. He's overwhelmed. This wasn't the right time." I stayed silent. "He's got a big promotion coming up. A lot's on his plate. You know how driven he is." "Yes," I said flatly. "I also know how easily he left." She paused. Then, too carefully, "You should consider other options. For yourself. For your future." It took me a second to realize what she meant. She didn't say the word, but it hung there. Termination. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm keeping this baby, Meredith. Your grandchild. The line went quiet. Then she murmured something like, "Well, that's your decision," and hung up. I stood there shaking, not just from anger, but from the sudden clarity. They were never going to support me. Not truly. Not unless it fit into their perfect narrative of Ethan's life. Over the next few days, I moved on autopilot. I went to work, smiled through meetings, answered emails like I wasn't barely holding it together. At night, I researched single motherhood, childcare costs, legal rights. I created a spreadsheet of everything from diapers to prenatal vitamins. I filed paperwork for temporary spousal support and looked into therapy. I also deleted every trace of Lauren from Ethan's tagged photos, then blocked them both. 3 days later, Ethan texted again, not to ask how I was, but to say he'd paid rent through the next month and would be contacting a lawyer. I stared at the screen. Divorce. It wasn't even spelled out. Just slipped in casually like ordering takeout. Like walking away from your pregnant wife was nothing but a mild inconvenience. That night, I taped the ultrasound photo to my refrigerator, a reminder of what mattered. Not Ethan, not Meredith, not any of them. Just me and the little heartbeat that changed everything. Liam was born on a rainy Tuesday night after 19 hours of labor and 3 full breakdowns where I swore I couldn't do it. But I did. I screamed into Nina's shoulder, cried into the hospital sheets, and finally, at 3:12 a.m., heard the tiniest cry I'd ever heard in my life, followed by a silence that shattered every part of me and rebuilt it all at once. He was 6 pounds, 10 ounces, with wisps of dark hair and a pair of lungs that made every nurse in the delivery room smile. The moment they placed him on my chest, the world narrowed to a single point. His warmth, his breath, his heartbeat against mine. I whispered, "We made it," over and over, not even sure who I was saying it to, him, me, or the ghost of the man who should have been there. Ethan didn't come. He knew my due date. I'd sent him the sonogram, even told him the hospital. I kept my phone nearby for days. It stayed silent. The birth certificate had only one parent listed. I didn't even hesitate. When I got home, I moved into a new apartment, just a little 2-bedroom in Beaverton, closer to Nina. The rent was too high, the walls too thin, and the heating unpredictable, but it was ours. Mine and Liam's. The dining room doubled as a nursery, half covered in diapers and pastel blankets. My living room became a sea of burp cloths and pacifiers. It was chaos and it was home. The first few weeks were brutal. I'd expected the sleepless nights, but not the relentless doubt. I questioned every bottle temperature, every rash, every sound Liam made in the dark. I cried in the shower where he couldn't hear me, wondered if I was enough. But somehow we found a rhythm. He taught me how to love without fear, how to exist without Ethan. I sent Ethan a photo of Liam the night we came home from the hospital. A simple message, he's here. He's healthy. No response. A week later, I uploaded pictures to a shared album I'd created months ago labeled for Dad. I don't know if he ever opened it. I doubt it. 3 weeks after Liam was born, Meredith texted me. Would love to see our grandson. No epaledi. No acknowledgement of what they'd said to me before. The suggestion, the dismissal, the erasure. Just flowers, expensive ones, with a card signed from Grandma and Grandpa. I placed them in the trash without opening the envelope. Still, I agreed to a visit. They arrived stiff and smiling, dressed like they were attending a corporate event. Meredith immediately pointed out how Liam had Ethan's ears. Paul took photos like he was documenting a product launch. They brought designer baby clothes and mentioned a potential college fund. They never asked how I was doing. They never mentioned Ethan. When Meredith brought up taking him for the weekend soon, I didn't even let her finish the sentence. No, I said, gently but firmly. He stays with me. She narrowed her eyes. You're punishing us for Ethan's choices. No, I replied, picking Liam up. I'm protecting my son from people who didn't want him to exist. The conversation ended there. Over the next few months, I stopped hoping Ethan would show up. Hope was too heavy to carry. The divorce papers arrived when Liam was 3 months old. Ethan didn't contest anything, didn't even ask for shared custody. His lawyer emailed mine a one-line summary. Mr. Holloway waives custodial rights at this time. It was so sterile, so detached, it almost felt like a business transaction, as if I were returning a rental. The judge ordered child support based on his income at the time. That was the only thing he showed up for. His accountant handled the rest. I started working part-time when Liam was 10 weeks old. Nina watched him twice a week. Daycare was out of reach, more than my rent. I juggled spreadsheets with one hand while bouncing Liam with the other. My boss, thankfully, was human. Anastasia let me work remote when I needed to, and even dropped off soup during a week when both Liam and I had the flu. Ethan's payments started coming in late, then skipped entirely. 1 month. I texted him 3 times to remind him. No reply, but I saw a photo of him and Lauren on a rooftop bar in San Francisco that same weekend. Tanned, smiling, carefree. That's when I blocked them both. Julie threw me a belated baby shower at her place when Liam was 4 months old. It wasn't fancy, just some friends, a homemade cake, and a banner that said, "You're already doing great." I didn't cry until they lit a single candle and sang for Liam like he'd already conquered the world just by being here. That night, I realized something. I wasn't waiting for Ethan anymore. Not for an apology. Not for closure. Not even for money. I had what I needed. Liam. A roof over our heads. And people who showed up, even when they didn't have to. I wasn't thriving yet, but I was surviving. And that was more than enough for now. Liam turned 5 last month. 5. It still catches me off guard sometimes, how fast time moved after Ethan left, how slow it felt in the beginning, and how somehow here we were. He's bright and kind and endlessly curious. He knows all the planets in order and has strong opinions about which dinosaurs were cooler than others. Every night before bed, he insists on one space fact and one hug extra tight. His laugh is my favorite sound in the world. And still, he has no idea who Ethan is. Not really. Last week, I took the morning off to walk Liam into his first day of kindergarten. He held my hand with such confidence, his Spider-Man backpack bouncing with each step, already scanning the schoolyard for friends. We said our goodbyes with only minor tears from me, not him. As I walked back toward the parking lot, I saw a familiar figure standing beside a black sedan, arms crossed. It was Leroy, Ethan's college roommate, one of the last people I expected to see at a school drop-off. He recognized me instantly. "Grace," he said, surprised. "Hey." I froze, then forced a polite smile. "Leroy, wow, it's been years." We chatted awkwardly and he asked about Liam, how old he was now. Then he dropped the bomb like it was nothing. "By the way, I don't know if you heard. Ethan and Lauren broke up." I blinked. "No, I didn't." "Yeah, happened a few months ago. She wanted kids. He didn't." He gave me a pointed look. Of course she did." He went on. "Told me Ethan had been laid off after his company downsized. That he was bouncing between freelance gigs and crashing on couches. Lauren kept the apartment. Ethan moved back in with his parents." I stared at my coffee as Leroy talked, feeling nothing. Not joy, not rage, just a strange sort of emptiness. Like hearing news about a character from a show I stopped watching seasons ago. That night, I looked around our home. The townhouse I'd bought the year before, with Liam's handprints painted in the hallway and a tomato garden that stubbornly refused to grow. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Our mornings were chaotic, but full of routine. 5:30 a.m. wake-ups, daycare drop-offs, school lunches, bedtime stories. My job at the architecture firm had stabilized. Anastasia promoted me to senior project manager. The raise helped me cover a better school, district for Liam. I was tired, always tired, but never empty. That same month, something else had begun to change. There was a man. His name was Kayla Brennan. He had a daughter, Emma, in Liam's class. We met at the school's fall carnival, both laughing as we chased our kids through the inflatable obstacle course. He wore a terrible dad joke t-shirt that said, "I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why I'm right." He made Liam laugh. He made me feel seen. Not for what I'd survived, but for who I was now. It started with playdates, then texts about forgotten school forms, then dinners, casual at first, after soccer practice, until one night, after Liam and Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, we stayed up talking until nearly 2 a.m. About grief, about raising kids alone, about showing up when it's hard. Caleb's wife died of cancer when Emma was a baby. He kept photos of her in the house, told Emma stories. He didn't try to erase the past. He carried it gently. That was what drew me in. The quiet strength, the tenderness. When he fixed Liam's wobbly bike seat without being asked, I almost cried. 6 months in, we had the talk. Not dramatic, just two adults sitting on a porch after bedtime, admitting we wanted to see where this could go. He didn't try to replace anyone. He simply loved us as we were. And that was everything. Then, Ethan came back. It happened on a Saturday morning. Pancake day. Liam had syrup on his cheeks, and we were all headed to his soccer game, Caleb helping tie his cleats. We took our usual spot on the sideline. Nina was late, as always, and just as the game started, Caleb nudged me. "Do you know that guy?" I looked up. It took a second to recognize him. Ethan, standing across the field, alone, arms crossed, watching. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. At halftime, Liam came running over for water, laughing about a near goal. That's when Ethan started walking toward us. Liam looked up, confused. "Who's that?" Before I could answer, Ethan was there. He looked thinner, older, less sure of himself. His voice cracked as he said, "He's gotten big." I sent Liam back to the team, then turned to Ethan. "You got the schedule from Meredith, didn't you?" He nodded. Caleb stood beside me, calm, quietly protective. When Ethan asked if we could talk, I agreed, briefly after the game. Caleb took the kids for victory ice cream. I met Ethan at the cafe across the street. He ordered me a cappuccino. I drink lattes now. He talked about therapy, sobriety, regret. He said he'd been clean for 8 months, that he wanted to be part of Liam's life. "I know I can't walk back and like nothing happened," he said, "but I want to try." I stared at him. "You don't know him," I said. "You missed everything, his first steps, first words, first day of school. You can't just show up now and pretend." He looked away, then asked about Caleb. "He's been more of a father to Liam than you've ever been," I said softly. "And I won't let you hurt him." Ethan nodded. "Would you consider letting me see him? Supervised, just to start." I didn't answer right away. I thought about Liam, about boundaries, about not letting my anger become his inheritance. "Maybe," I said, "with conditions. You earn your place. You don't just claim it." That night, I watched Liam asleep in his bed, his hands curled into fists. I whispered, "I'll protect you, no matter what. Because love isn't what you say. It's what you show up for." 3 days after that awkward coffee shop meeting, Ethan called me again. His voice was softer this time, measured, careful. He said he'd thought a lot about what I'd said and that he still wanted to try. Not just to see Liam, but to somehow fix what he'd broken. I told him we could begin with short, supervised meetings. 30 minutes. Public place. I would be present for every second. And if he disappeared again, just once, there would be no more chances. He agreed. I spoke to Liam first. It was harder than I expected. His little brow furrowed, like he was working through math in his head. When I told him someone wanted to meet him, someone who had helped bring him into the world, He asked the question I'd been dreading since the day Ethan walked out. Does he want to be my dad now? I swallowed hard. He says he wants to know you, but he has to earn your trust, the way people do when they haven't been there. Liam thought about that, then nodded. Okay, can Caleb come too? That one cracked my heart open in a different way. I hugged him tight. The first meeting took place at the park near our house. Ethan showed up early, holding a boxed Lego soccer set under one arm. He looked nervous, out of place. Liam clutched my hand the whole walk from the car to the bench where Ethan waited. Hi, Ethan said. Hi, Liam replied, barely louder than a whisper. They sat on the grass and opened the box. I watched from a nearby bench as they built goals and tiny plastic players together. Ethan asked questions, listened when Liam talked about his favorite team. There was a moment, just one, where Liam laughed at something Ethan said. It was small, brief, but I saw it. We did 3 more meetings like that over the next 2 weeks. Then Ethan pushed, asked if he could take Liam to a movie alone. No, I said instantly. 3 weeks versus 5 years? Not happening. He didn't argue, just nodded slowly and said, okay, maybe we could all go together. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. And then he showed up at our house, unannounced, with Meredith and Paul in tow. They stood on my porch like a scene from a bad family drama, Meredith launching into some scripted monologue about moving forward as a family, while Paul handed Liam a wrapped gift and Ethan hovered behind them, eyes full of guilt. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Not like this, I said. You don't just show up and act like you didn't vanish. Ethan pulled me aside while his parents waited in uncomfortable silence. And then, like a plot twist from a story I didn't ask to live, he said it. I still love you, Grace. I never stopped. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. You walked out on me while I was pregnant. You ghosted your son for 5 years. You love a memory, Ethan, not the woman standing here. But we could try, he said, for Liam's sake, to be a real family. No, y replía, because a real family doesn't abandon each other. Caleb has been more of a father than you ever tried to be. And I don't need a man who only comes back when everything else falls apart. He left that day with his shoulders hunched and eyes full of things I no longer recognized. Meredith texted twice that week. I didn't answer. The following day, I met Caleb on our back porch. I told him everything. I knew this might happen, he said, voice steady. But I need to ask, are you still his? I shook my head before he even finished the sentence. You're the one who stayed. You're the one who built something with us. He pulled me close. Then that's all I need to know. Weeks passed. Ethan hasn't called again. I set clear boundaries through my lawyer. Supervised visits only, my approval required for any changes. Meredith sent another birthday card. It stayed sealed. Liam, meanwhile, is thriving. He started reading chapter books and decided he wants to be an astronaut. He asked Caleb to help build a cardboard rocket in the garage, and Caleb said yes without hesitation. The other day, I caught them both sitting on the floor, deep in a space book, Caleb pointing to constellations while Liam rested his head on his shoulder. Later that night, as I tucked Liam into bed, he whispered, I like my family just how it is. I kissed his forehead. Me too. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe Ethan will drift back into silence. Maybe he won't. Maybe one day Liam will ask questions I can't answer, and I'll have to walk that bridge with him, step by difficult step. But I do know this. I am not the woman Ethan left. I am not the mother who begged for breadcrumbs of attention. I am not holding on to a life that never deserved me. I am standing in the home I built with my own hands, beside a man who chose us, raising a boy who is the very best part of me. Sometimes the family you build from ashes ends up stronger than the one that burned you down. And sometimes letting go is the most radical act of love you can offer yourself. So no, I don't want him back. Not even close.